What's going on, everybody? Hope everybody's having a good Monday, good start to the week. I'm sure a lot of us, have consumed some caffeine today. And this is something that's been on my mind and something I've been talking with a couple clients about over the last week. And so, something I'm currently doing is decreasing my caffeine intake. So, I'm real tired this morning. I was up at like 5:30 in the morning. Um, and so I've been up. I'm pretty tired throughout a long day, and my caffeine consumption is down. So this, every time I start to decrease my caffeine intake, the days kind of just drag. They're tougher to get through, but it's an important thing, and I'll kind of go over why. And so, caffeine is the world's the most widely used um, stimulant, right? It's a drug essentially. I mean, it is a drug, right? And so it's used all over the world, right? The most widely used stimulant in the world. And so let's look at what are the pros of using caffeine, right? I know for me personally. Hey Michelle, how are you doing? I hope you're doing well after your fall a couple weeks back. Really hope you recover. Anyways, the pros of caffeine consumption are increased performance, increased alertness, increased awareness, decreased fatigue, right? So these are things that are very helpful, especially if we've got a lot to get done. So obviously that kind of goes over the pros of caffeine, but let's talk about the cons and the things that aren't talked about enough. I know that a lot of us probably, whether it's us or we know someone who can consume an insane amount of caffeine and not really even feel an effect. Some people can consume upwards of, I've heard horror stories of people consuming three energy drinks a day, right? Like 900 milligrams of caffeine. Or I know when I did a bodybuilding show and was eating next to nothing. I was on I was so calorie restricted and not getting much carbohydrates, not much energy from dietary fats. I was on upwards of like 1,000 milligrams of caffeine just to get through the day, right? Very dangerous, not recommended, and can really lead to issues. This is why I'm not a big fan of pre-workout, because they help you build a tolerance to caffeine so quickly. And when we look at the cons, right, one of the biggest cons I would say is that it decreases the effectiveness of serotonin, and it also triggers the release of dopamine, which can make it very, very addictive and easy to build a tolerance, right? Because we want that next hit. We want to feel that feeling of alertness, right? Um, so you build a tolerance very rapidly, and you want to start to decrease in your increments when you start to notice that your tolerance is building, because one, it's going to require way more caffeine to get the job done as you build a tolerance, right? um, Not only that, it can lead to a lot of issues down the line, right? So it can lead to the overconsumption of caffeine, right? It can lead to always needing caffeine just to get something done, which can lead to like a huge crash in our energy. I don't know why my light's messing up here. Um, so and also, like, you never want to just quit cold turkey. You never want to just go from drinking a ton of caffeine to drinking absolutely no caffeine. Because what'll happen is it can cause headaches, it can cause shakiness, stomach upset, anxiety, all sorts of things, right? And all sorts of negative things. Another thing is, if you've ever heard, don't consume caffeine past 2 p.m. or don't consume caffeine past 4 p.m., whatever you may have heard, right? The reason for that being is because, even so, say you consume caffeine at 5 p.m., right? You've got to get through your workday. You consume your last cup of coffee around 5 p.m. You may be able to get to sleep that night, right? And you're not really going to still be feeling that caffeine because you're fucking exhausted. It's been a long day. But the thing is the half-life of caffeine, I believe, is like up to like 12 hours. So it actually acts as an upper in the body. And this is why a lot of times, a lot of people sleep like shit and they don't know why. This is typically why, because you're consuming caffeine too late in the day. Maybe you built too high of a tolerance and you just need too much of it throughout the course of a day. So this is why anytime I start to go, like right now I'm working on getting below 150 milligrams, which is about 2 cups of coffee a day. I've been averaging below 200 milligrams for about, I would say, a week. But before that, it was getting to the point where I was finishing a half a pot or a quarter or 3/4 of a pot of coffee a day, probably tiptoeing that line of 300 to 350 milligrams of caffeine per day. A lot of experts would say anything over 400 is building a little bit too much of a tolerance. I would say going above like 600 milligrams will probably put you in a pretty unhealthy range. And guys, there are horror stories out there. I remember when I was going through the Precision Nutrition level 2 program, the thing that made me stop, I actually ended up shortly thereafter quitting a job that I had for Muscle Tech as a rep. Was because I just couldn't stand behind the products anymore, because pre-workout is like an overdose of caffeine, and I had learned of these 2 cases of men in their 30s who ended up having heart attacks as a result of overconsumption of caffeine. Now, clearly there could have been other factors. I think in one of them it was like they couldn't really figure out if it was just the caffeine. But the point is this stuff is serious. This stuff can be dangerous. And so you don't want to be over consuming too much caffeine every single day of your life, because it is a drug, right? And so if you start to build a tolerance, taper yourself back, because the thing is once you taper back, that caffeine will have so much more of an effect, right? I'm noticing now, I was getting to the point where I would need like a 3rd cup of coffee just to get enough energy to like do what I needed to do. But now it's like I can get halfway through that 1st cup and I'm getting energy from it, so it's really is a crazy thing, guys. I would say, look at your own caffeine consumption and see where you're at, and see if there's any changes that you could make. See if you could kind of slowly start tapering things down to where you'll get more of a benefit from your caffeine consumption, and you're not doing anything to kind of negate other goals, right? Like if your goal is, if you've got a weight loss goal or a physique goal, right, recovery is going to be a huge part of that. And if your caffeine intake is through the roof, it's going to hinder recovery, especially if you're consuming caffeine late into the afternoon, into the evening, and so on and so forth. So just something to consider, guys. We need to keep our caffeine intake in check for it to be most effective. All right, have a good night, everyone.